Now, preview time. So let's take a look at what's coming your way.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! 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 Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, exclusively here as always on the Casa D18 Studios channel. I, of course, am your host, the Renegade JJ Williams, wishing each and every one of you that is joining me here today a happy Thanksgiving. It's Thursday, so it's time for us to jump into a new streaming series that I'm going to be covering for the next few weeks. And what better series to kick off on Thanksgiving than the new Disney Plus original series, The Santa Clauses. Chapter 1, entitled Good to Ho, starring Tim Allen, Elizabeth Mitchell, Cal Penn, Rupali Red, Devin Bright, Austin Kane, and Elizabeth Allen Dick. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me here once again for another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews. As I said in the introduction, happy Thanksgiving to each and every one of you that is joining me here today. Thank you for taking a few moments out of your busy day, out of spending time with your family, to come here and watch my latest offering, the first chapter of the Disney Plus original series, The Santa Clauses. This is chapter 1, called Good to Ho. And our episode begins on Christmas Eve, as Grace Chosky is decorating for Santa's impending arrival. Her father, Simon, is holding a Zoom meeting with his colleagues in an attempt to discover why his company's delivery system isn't working. When Santa lands on their roof, it causes the house to shake. So Simon and Grace rush to a safe room, unaware of what's happening. And when they emerge, Santa has delivered all of his presents for Grace and completely decorated the living room. Back in Santa's sleigh, Santa discovers from Noel, his head elf, that the list is even shorter than usual this year. Therefore, Santa decides to make a stop at a house that isn't on his list, one of his favorite stops. We then flash back to 1995, when Santa visited a young girl named Sarah. Now, Sarah, for those of you that remember the movie, is the one who had left soy milk out for Santa, because the year prior, when Scott Calvin was first assuming the role of Santa Claus, he had told her that he was lactose intolerant. We then come back to the present day, and we discover a now adult Sarah sleeping on her parents' couch. Unfortunately, Sarah doesn't recognize him, as she's grown older and lost her belief in the magic. Santa then reaches into his bag and pulls out a Polly Pocket, which triggers her memory of him and restores her belief in him. However, the additional magic that Santa has used causes him to be unable to ascend the chimney. Back at the North Pole, we catch up with Cal, the former Buddy Claus, Sandra, and Mrs. Claus, who are all awaiting Santa's return. While back in the sleigh, Santa admits to Noel that the magic is beginning to fail him, as the sleigh begins to plummet. The elves monitoring Santa's rounds see this on their screens, and they rush to notify Mrs. Claus. Meanwhile, Sandra is talking to her mom and tells her that she feels lonely with no other kids her age around. Sandra then points out that her mom also has no first name, and then begins to inquire about the Mrs. Clauses before her. Santa returns to the North Pole, and after having a nap and a belated Christmas with his own family, he begins to confide in Mrs. Claus about how the world is changing, and he admits that his magic is beginning to fail him. When Mrs. Claus mentions the possibility of retiring, Santa gets a little bit touchy. Mrs. Claus then asks him if the Santa before him had a wife, and brings up the fact that she has no name. Santa tries to point out to her that her name is Carol, and she says that that was her before name, as in before she became Mrs. Claus. Santa attempts to escape the conversation by going up the chimney, only for the magic to fail him once again. When Santa goes to the North Pole doctor in an effort to find out what is happening to him, he's told that he has lost 10 pounds. The doctor then points out that the loss of magic could be due to the children of the world not needing or believing in Santa anymore. We then jump ahead, and it's 1 year after the beginning of this episode, and Santa begins to prepare for Christmas Eve once again. As Noel goes through the list to see where they need to stop first, he discovers that some of the regular stops are once again missing, and as a result, the sleigh begins to react accordingly. Inside of Santa's first stop, we see Simon Chosky being interviewed on the television as his company, Everything Now, has failed to deliver their product in time for Christmas as previously promised. After the interview, Simon goes outside and he sees Santa in the sky making his rounds, causing him to wonder why he can't deliver as efficiently as Santa Claus. Back in the sleigh, Santa admits to Noel that he has allowed the world to affect his Christmas spirit. And when Santa goes to make his next delivery, he misses the chimney and falls off the roof, landing in a pile of snow on the ground below as our episode comes to its close. I felt this was a really good way to kind of kickstart the Santa Clauses series. We get reacquainted to Santa, Scott Calvin, and Mrs. Claus, Carol. And you notice I only referred to them as Santa and Mrs. Claus because during this portion of the story, that is who they are. There's no point where they're really Scott or Carol. So as such, I'm using Santa and Mrs. Claus to describe what's happening. But we get reacquainted with Scott and Carol, Santa and Mrs. Claus. We meet the former Buddy Claus who has grown up. He's now using the name Cal, short for Calvin, Scott Calvin. So we're re-meeting him. We see that they have a new child, Sandra, a daughter now, a few years younger than Cal, Buddy. So obviously they've had her since the Santa Claus 3. But we get to meet these characters again. We're being introduced to new characters, Simon and Grace Chosky, who are obviously going to factor heavily into the story. Noel, his new head elf, having taken over for Curtis, who in turn had taken over for Bernard. We see another elf who didn't really get described much in this episode by the name of Edie, and another one by the name of Betty, who is either the girlfriend or the wife of Noel. I'm not really sure how it plays out in elf lore, but we can definitely tell that they are a couple. It was just a really good, solid kickoff, as I said, to this series. Meeting the new people that we need to know, reacquainting ourselves with the characters from the past, anxiously awaiting for some of the other cameos to pop up. We know going into this that Charlie is going to factor in. We know going into this that Bernard is going to factor in. It's just a matter of waiting for their appearances and seeing how those characters weave into and tie into the story here. But I thought it was a good setup. I thought that the ending of the episode with Scott falling off the roof, much like the Santa that he replaced did back in the original movie, I thought that was a great callback. I enjoyed the flashback with young Sarah. That moment actually made me mist up a little bit, get a little watery eyed, and they do something similar in episode 2, tying it back to the movies, which we'll get there when we get there next week. keeping in mind that the first 2 episodes dropped on the same day. So I was able to see them back to back, even though we're going to be covering them in subsequent weeks. But I like how they're doing this, and they're tying some of the events that are happening today into the movie series that we know so well, from the Santa Claus 2, and Santa Claus 3, the Escape Clause. Very good storytelling on behalf of the Disney company, Disney Plus, and the writers of the story here. Of course, as I always do with the TV shows, I'm not going to rate each episode. I will give an overall star rating at the end of the series. But yeah, it just was a solid, good way to kick the show off. What did you guys think of the first episode of the Santa Clauses, called Good to Ho? Let me know. If you're watching the premiere, leave your thoughts and comments over here. If you're watching on demand later in the day, leave your thoughts and comments down here. Let's have that conversation, that discussion, that debate, that interaction in the comments below that I'm always asking you guys for. And make sure you guys tune in tomorrow, right here on the Casa D18 Studios channel, for another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews. And we're going to wrap up this week of Sandra Bullock films, and we're going to discuss another pairing of Sandra and Keanu Reeves. We're going to discuss The Lake House, starring Sandra Bullock, Keanu Reeves, Christopher Plummer, Ebon Moss-Bachrach, and Dylan Walsh. You're not going to want to miss out on that. Right here on the Casa D18 Studios channel, right here on another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, The Lake House. You know, it's been so much fun this year getting back into the swing of things with this. As you guys remember, I kicked back off in May after taking a multi-month hiatus. So for Thanksgiving this year, what I am thankful for is all of you, my loyal viewers who tune in on a regular, support the channel, always watching my reviews, leaving your comments, joining in for the stuff that I do with the Jeff Meacham Network and across the Jeff Meacham Network multiverse of media. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Make sure that notification bell is turned on. That way you always get alerted anytime a video drops right here on the Casa D18 Studios channel, or anytime that I do a live stream, as is the case with Statboy Sports Bar, Open Mic Night, pay-per-view PLE coverage, etc. Share this video with your family, friends, loved ones, co-workers, movie fanatics, cinephiles, fans of the Santa Claus, fans of Tim Allen, fans of Elizabeth Mitchell, fans of Cal Penn. Anybody you can think of that would enjoy this video and my content, share it with them. It's the only way we're going to boost up my visibility in YouTube's algorithms so I can eventually get monetized and make some money on these endeavors. Thank you once again to everybody who joined me today. Took just a few minutes out of your busy Thanksgiving to show me the love that you guys have been all year. I greatly appreciate it, and I appreciate it more than you will ever know. And I will see you guys next time.